Good afternoon, everyone. We are starting this session. Session 2 is enabling a cooperation. We have 6 speakers, and before the 6 presentation, you will have a keynote. So we'll start with the keynote. You will have the opportunity to ask questions after the keynote. Then we will have 2 presentations, and after the 3 presentations, break, for Q&A. And before we resume with the last 3 presentations. So we'll start now with the keynote. It is given by Nazar Hassan, who is UNESCO Senior STI Regional Advisor for the Arab State, UNESCO in Egypt. And the title of the keynote is The Arab Youth's Role in the Region's Journey to Sustainable Development. So, Nazar, you have the floor.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Rasulullah. The talk, as appears on the screen, is the role of youth towards achieving the SDGs in developing countries. Okay, from the perspectives of policy making, transforming economies, and STI. This is basically a new conceptual framework that we are actually trying to see if it's going to actually fly, achieving open science in developing countries. Okay, to start, I'm going to give just a quick blurb on the UNESCO recommendation and how we link that to the role of youth in implementing the SDGs. We all recognize the urgency of addressing complex and interconnected environmental, social, and economic challenges. And it's very important that, as our director said in the morning or before lunch, that you don't think about open science just as part tackling research or as part tackling, if you want to call it, applied sciences. You really need to go beyond that and incorporate all the contemporary challenges that we have within the society. And actually, by doing that, you are disseminating the responsibility to basically the citizens of the society, not just the researchers and the university staff, as people kind of think. So basically, challenges for people and the planet, such as poverty, health issues, access to education, rising inequalities and disparities, and that is actually very important. I put a highlight on rising inequalities and disparities, and this is some of actually the good reasons why open science is very important for developing countries, because it tackles the developmental issues that we have. It tackles the question, how do you actually achieve sustainable development in our neck of the woods? We're talking here about developing countries. And of course, the Arab region is part of that. The Open Science Recommendation has actually identified a certain number of issues that should be taken care of by member states as the key objective to the initiative. Definitely promoting a common understanding of what open science is, developing an enabling policy environment, investing in infrastructure, and that is very important, and that is why UNESCO is seeing ASEAN as an important, actually, partner in the region. Investing in training, education, digital literacy. This is important because with open science, there, as we will see in a few minutes, there are a number of skills that are being defined that you need to actually build capacities in. At the same time, these key areas of action also are the key challenges. So you talk about capacity building, policies, financial support, infrastructure, monitoring, and this is required for open science. As I said a minute earlier, capacity building is important. You need to put the infrastructure in place. You need the finance and so forth. Okay, we all know that the nature of science now is actually changing from a closed system to an open one and shared. I know a lot of actually researchers are resenting the movement of opening their research work to others, but it is important because sharing knowledge at an early stage is seen as a positive thing to the society in general. Okay, open science definitely brings about some new socio-cultural changes when you talk about openness and connectivity. This is important. But when you talk about openness and connectivity in developing countries, remember that a lot needs to be put in place before you talk open science. One of those is the capacity, the building capacities. And that is why we say here that human resource development will be essential to support open science. So encouraging science to be more connected to societal needs is important, and promoting equal opportunity for all. Now we are not talking about only scientists and researchers, we are definitely talking about the citizens citizens of communities. And hence, open science can be a true game changer in fulfilling the human right to science and bringing the science technology innovation gaps closer and between countries. We want also here to just highlight the issue with the global COVID-19 because within and coming out of the COVID, we were actually, most of our work has been actually driven by unprecedented advances in our digital world. And we need also to make note of that and take it into consideration when you're talking advancement. Okay, now if you want to invest in capacity building for open science, these are just a few ideas that we actually brainstormed and came up with. So we need to develop a national human resource development strategy. The main item that I want to focus on here is item number 1, developing a national human resource development strategy for promotion of open science skills. We need to have a strategy that defines what those competencies and skills are. I'm going to just jump quickly so that Mr. Chairman does not stare at me. Develop a standardized set of open science competencies. That is very important if you're talking about investing in capacity building. And that should be aligned with specific researcher career stages and specific actors' needs. And by actors here, we mean all other stakeholders other than researchers. And then, if you develop recognized skills and training programs in support of attainment of these skills. Now, for the role of youth, how is it that you are actually looking at youth to achieve the SDGs? We know that you have to understand the status quo of our countries. You know, the level of unemployment, why unemployment is happening, what's happening to the youth after they graduate, where do you want to actually go from there, what resources do you actually need, and what do you have in hand right now, and you keep going through this list of what's and whys and whos, and you end up thinking that, okay, so we need to utilize something that, like the integrated whole system design approach and strategic management to actually identify the role of youth. Okay, now going back to item 1, which is the human resource development strategy, we thought that the international community is called upon to undertake a paradigm shift to facilitate the practical and accelerated implementation of the 2030 agenda by putting open science and SDG 1, which is about extreme poverty reduction, at the core of the proposed solution. And we will see why those two. The proposed framework calls for the utilization of a set of well-designed poverty reduction and social protection policies. Remember that 80% of our population live in rural areas and they are defined under the poverty line. So basically, if you tackle rural areas, populations, you will have a huge impact of development that is required in developing countries. We thought of putting forward what we proposed as Aristotle's framework for action. This is a new initiative that we are actually presenting here, and I will talk about this in a few. The proposed framework, Aristotle framework for action, revolves around enacting the principle of leaving no one behind by focusing on the well-being and development of the most vulnerable and most impoverished 20 to 30% of each region's population. And of course, we know that this actually happened in Brazil between the 2003 and 2011, where actually the country looked at the lowest 10%, most poor 10%, capacitated them, gave them new jobs and productivity, and they spur the economy forward. So the second major part of the strategy is also something that we newly developed as the Pro-Poor Environmentally Green Engineering Systems Standard. We say PEGIS. This is a green technologies and application selection mechanism that we don't have now in developing countries. People talk about SDGs, and our countries do not know what is the way forward. You know, you have 17 SDGs, and it's a little bit difficult. So this is an action selection mechanism to foster accelerated sustainable development in developing countries. PEGIS standard also allows for easy identification of the appropriate set of green jobs and allows for building the right type of infrastructure in rural areas, and hence contributing to reduce inequality within societies. So now you see that we're getting closer to the fact that we are actually talking about jobs for the jobless. Okay? The PEG standard is definitely in conformity with the requirements of the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection. I hope you heard about that. That was an initiative that was actually launched by the Secretary General of the UN in September 2021. And it's basically designed to generate interest and political alignment, support resource mobilization to consolidate the financial backbone, and provide technical support to strengthen existing capacities at country and regional levels. Similarly, and as I indicated above, the PEG standard will support the implementation of an integrated package of environmental policy, employment, and social protection with strong and sustainable economic and social return. How am I doing about time? I have 4 minutes. Okay. So, you know, I just want to mention here that investment in infrastructure in the rural areas will spur productivity and bring a lot of support for building capacities in rural areas. Now, from the open science perspective, you have to understand that there are two tracks for scientific research. The one on basic sciences, usually entrusted to universities and research centers, but the other track is applied research or applied sciences, and this is dependent on the industrial sector to do. And this is something that we really don't have in the Arab states or in developing countries in general. Industrial sector is of great importance. And that is why the idea of infrastructure in rural areas would bring a lot of industries and SMEs. Okay, now the new, and this is the most important part, I will say it in 2 minutes. The new proposed standard calls for the creation of a series of regional sustainable development, green technologies, education, and utilization centers of excellence. And these are going to focus on TOTs in many educational areas, very quickly functional and digital literacy skills, TVET, and by the way, TVET has to be identified, the module, so that it actually covers all kind of economic sectors: resilient housing, water desalination, renewable energy, and so forth. It's not the regular classic TVET that we see in our schools today. Another item is the entrepreneurship and enterprise education. Fourth, global citizenship education, and this is very important. You give them cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral skills. And last but not least, we thought of actually STEM education for youth through a network of science and engineering fairs focusing on girls and young women. The set of trainers would be part of a robust, actually nationwide training program that is intended to propagate their knowledge further at the national levels. And the plan here is actually to train all unemployed college graduates in the targeted countries to specialize in a set of pre-selected technological solutions that are actually given through those centers of excellence through e-platforms, okay? The technology universities around the world, and specifically targeted technology manufacturers, shall be also called upon to assist and support the development of the different digital educational modules required to operationalize our centers of excellence. Some of these e-modules could actually be gathered today from existing knowledge sources, such as do-it-yourself series. I think by saying this, I'm actually finishing the presentation on the proposal. I open the door for the floor if they have any quick questions. If not, I will go and sit silently.
Thank you very much, Nazar. Actually, you did very well. You had 10 seconds left, so congratulations. Okay. Let us give us a couple of minutes for questions to Nazar.
I think it's a lot of information in 11 minutes, so I give them a break to think. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. Any question from the floor? I have a question. You mentioned challenges, to advance open science in the region. So you mentioned a couple of challenges, and among them infrastructure, capacity building, etc., etc. And you also mentioned, cultural change. So from my experience in our region, for instance, so this is the issue of policy development and cultural change are very challenging, because you may have the money for infrastructure, you may have the money to build capacity, but if there is no mindset, to move towards open science, it's very difficult. That's what we experience now in my region, for instance. Do you experience the same?
That is very true, but you have to understand one thing. You have to understand one thing. When you talk about policies, okay, there are two pieces here. First of all, what are the policies and policy instruments that you need to put in place to push forward the movement of open science? At the same time, you know that your decision makers have not been trained on that. So it is also part of the first challenge, which is the capacity building. So part of your capacity building has to go to the decision makers to be able to actually put the right policies and absorb policies and implement policies. That is very important. And that is why I say, open science is not easy. You need to put it in a package that can actually push it forward. And this is why in our office we thought that we should put it in a proposal that actually attaches SDGs implementation to unemployment, to actually using science for development.
Yes, please.
Yes.
Please, Heba.
Actually, I have a comment. Just yesterday I was moderating a panel on science and diplomacy in the context of the UFM, and I wanted to share an interesting finding related to open science. I think the speakers highlighted the need for finding a harmonized language, because in many cases we focus about putting in place the infrastructure or creating the platforms, but we do not manage to find the harmonized language needed for open science, for fostering open science. And one of the interesting ideas is that learning and education at the early stage is the key to create that harmonized language, so that while we create the infrastructures, we allow the users to use it through learning and education. And I thought it's good to mention that in the context of the ASREN meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Heba, for this comment. Any other comment from the panel or from the floor? So, if not, we'll move. Thank you very much, Nazar, for this very good keynote. So, our next speaker is Vadim Deleu, who is a program manager at the European Commission Directorate General NIR in Belgium. He will speak about promoting regional cooperation in the Southern Neighbourhood region. So, Vadim, you have the floor.
Okay. All right, well, good afternoon. I will try to be short also on my side, and I'm program manager in the regional unit for the Directorate General, responsible for the neighborhood and enlargement areas of the European Commission. So my unit implements regional projects as EUMed Connect, which used to be implemented by our unit, and a peer exercise is being done in DG INPA with my direct colleagues from Africa Connect 3, with whom we very closely coordinate. I think it's important just for you to understand who am I and what am I doing here. I think I would like to mention, first of all, because it's my first opportunity to participate in such an event, the importance of such a regional actor as is ASREN, which provides a platform for exchanges for the research and education community of the region. It's a locally led initiative, and I wish we could only see more of such initiatives also in the other region and in the other areas. Obviously, the region remains key for the engagement at EU level, and there are important amounts of budget that previously my colleagues and the EU ambassador has clearly spelled out. But I think what is important is that this bilateral cooperation with each of the currently 8 countries in the region with whom the EU has ongoing formal cooperation, that this is being complemented by regional actions, such as, once again, the ones that are financed by the EU here, not the least because this builds bridges, this enables communities to talk, this bonds and integrates even further, and this is wonderful. This is the model that we want to promote. I would like to mention a few initiatives on our side. I'll make it even shorter because there's an important part on the figures, but I don't think that's so much pertinent. But what I would like to mention is that my colleague this morning, he very briefly mentioned this super interesting initiative, which is Medusa, which is this 40 million euro grant contribution, right, for the research and education, well, in this case to ASREN. The project, I would perhaps re-emphasize some of the elements, that the project aims to directly interconnect for the first time the northern and southern shores of the Mediterranean But it's not just a single bilateral cable, it's really something that is much more complex, interconnecting also countries between themselves, allowing for researchers to have direct projects between the countries, be it Tunisia, Morocco, or others, you name them, the possibilities are different. So the Medusa would, sorry, there is a sound. It unequivocally promotes and supports the EU ambition to address the digital divide with the partner countries. As highlighted also in our key strategic documents, the economic and investment plan for the Southern Neighbourhood, in the framework of which a lot of funds would be leveraged also through banks. Medusa is only an example. There could be many more such examples, and digital is an area where there is a lot of potential indeed. Why Medusa? We believe that, well, clearly in the last 10 years, the data traffic volume has grown with a 2-digit figure, and the demand for data traffic is even exponentially further growing, and this needs to be anticipated with advanced technologies. So with the EU grant contribution, Medusa will offer secured connectivity up to 200 gigabits, as previously outlined. And once again, in the discussions that were there with the individual NRENs yesterday, which were quite enlightening, I'd like to highlight perhaps just one or two key elements. That the communication is obviously important at this crucial point in time. The project will be there in 2 years from now approximately, but that allows time for the for ASREN and for the national research and education networks to communicate about this opportunity and to engage the end users in particular about the existence of this opportunity. So we would really like to see a bottom-up approach in the way this is organized, a top-down but also a bottom-up. When I speak about top-down, obviously this key initiative needs to be communicated also at high level, at higher levels, not only left to the NRENs through the main channel of the responsible ministry, but also on the EU side. Obviously there would be a clear push to integrate key messages into the formal policy dialogue of the ongoing cooperation. This is something that we would look forward to discuss also with the colleagues individually at in each country. This is work in progress. I also wanted to note that yesterday it became evident that the NRENs would have to integrate Medusa into their concrete action plans for rolling out the project. And that would obviously have to be underpinned also with numbers, sustainability, and clearly maximizing the use of the capacity at each individual country. So I can only encourage once again that ASREN jointly with counterparts from Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt and Algeria to take full advantage of this unique opportunity offered by the project. It's the first of such kind. But obviously Medusa in principle would not only be limited to research and education. We look, the cable is there actually to cater for other areas, and the connectivity can be expanded to public and private sector stakeholders, well, exactly beyond research and education, involving innovation hubs and doing projects with stakeholders in the area of health, but then potentially in the area of trade and customs. I would bring a few elements on that just in a couple of minutes later. I briefly wanted to touch about a parallel initiative which we are, or rather DG INTPA colleagues, so the Director General for International Partnerships is closely coordinating with us, which is the Africa Connect 4 co-creation exercise, and some of the NRENs, well, certainly the regional RENs, but perhaps to some extent the NRENs have also been involved, consulted in this process. We are happy of the ongoing discussions with ASREN, which pertains to DG NIA, but that's the Commission internal organization. What is important here is coordination, obviously. What I wanted to say is that through this co-creation exercise, it becomes more and more evident that there is interest to step up the efforts to support the evolution and the strengthening of the research and education networks. That's quite a key element on which the project could potentially focus in the future. The overall aim obviously would continue to be to provide the R&E communities, being students, teachers, research and scientists, with high-speed internet and digital tools, but there is a push in order to diversify, have something that is somewhat varied from the previous versions of the Africa Connect initiative, and we welcome this in DGNIR, and we look forward to continue this discussion with our counterparts present today here. As our colleagues from the related DG mentioned, there should be more capillarity, as they refer to it, and more engagement also with the national entrants in the context of the future project. I would perhaps mention a third and last initiative. There are many, but one of the key work that we are doing in our bilateral unit is to support the identification and formulation of a future regional program on digital connectivity, which would go obviously beyond research and education. And here we are looking in the potential to engage with different communities and stakeholders at regional level in areas as trust and electronic signature, e-governance, e-trade, e-customs, e-health, digital skills, incubation hubs, startups. I think it's a quite crucial exercise in the sense that the political priority on the digital engagement in the digital area has been spelled out in the previous years, but it's only now that it actually trickles down into real concrete work. And I know that in Egypt at the EU delegation and also in other neighboring countries, there are bilateral actions also that are being prepared in the regional, in the digital area, and we look forward to complement that with our regional work. So it's certainly going to be interesting and also provide opportunities for also the interested stakeholders who are here today, because they would, as I said previously, be the gateway or continue to be the main entry, I think, for regional cooperation, one of the main entries. My colleague would certainly elaborate on more concrete and tangible things that you might imminently benefit from, Heba. But before I finish, I would like to mention that digital would remain a cross-cutting area in all specific focal or sectoral areas, and certainly the EU will keep it high on its agenda with substantial financial contributions. So this is a lot of work, joint work for us to come. I would like to conclude by sending my congratulations to ASREN and to Mr. Yusuf Torman, the Executive Director, and thanking him for the invitation to join today's event. And I wish him a lot of success with Medusa, but also other initiatives in the region that he's piloting. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Vadim. You spoke a bit more than the allocated time, but the European Commission is putting 40 million on the table. So I was actually ready to give you more minutes. But so thank you for this presentation. So you have the opportunity, yes, please. If you can just say your name, there is a microphone here. Your name, your organization, and then your question.
Can you hear me? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Farida Fassi from University Mohammed V in Rabat, Morocco. So I go ahead with my question. Thank you very much for this nice presentation. And I'm really happy to hear the initiative. And I would like to give my feedback as a physicist, as a scientist, when hearing about the, let's say, research infrastructure or any kind of top-down strategy similar that you mentioned, from the scientific community, I would say there is, I'm talking in the context of Morocco, on the region, there is always the gap between the community consultation and the top-down, let's say, decision. So how we could really create some kind of linkage, link between those communities and to benefit from this infrastructure, particularly if it will be available. I don't know exactly the years, how we could establish some kind of dialogue to see what is the need from the community, scientific community, and whether what we are preparing will be used, or you see my question. Because I heard a lot of initiative, but from, as I said before, from our community as a scientist, we have difficulties to get data, we have difficulties to get the research infrastructure, we have to get difficulty to perform our research as best as we can. Thank you.
Vadim.
Merci beaucoup pour cette merveilleuse question qui est pertinente, je pense, pour tout le monde, hein, pour tous les États. I will like to say that it's a very pertinent question for the other countries or comment, in my opinion. So I can only welcome a session on that as Bary. I think it's a very topical issue to discuss. In my opinion, there could be several solutions. Well, first of all, your proactive approach is, I think, a good first starting point. The second one would be obviously the engagement with the CCK in this case. We're very happy of their presence today. I think there would be a good, not entry point, but a good representative who would lead the message further, so they could collect different data, different information, messages across the community and then hand it on, because obviously you're many, this needs to be channeled. And the third thing I wanted to say, there are concrete opportunities in the framework of which you as a legal entity, university, can participate in existing framework opportunities that, again, my colleague would elaborate, and that would engage you in partnership with other universities and research centers on specific topics of interest.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand you are from Morocco, so the organization should be CNRST, right?
No, I am from Mohammed Fad. Yes, exactly. We are behind.
CNRST, okay, yes. Sure. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Another question? So actually I wanted 3 presentations and Q&A, but let us have it more interactive. Yes, please.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a technical question. The 40 million is only going to 3 countries in North Africa, correct? Which is Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt.
Yes, and Morocco.
Okay, 4, Morocco. How much would it cost to actually extend it further south, Mauritania or Sudan, for example?
I don't have a.
No, is it expensive to extend it to other countries? That's why you selected 4, or?
No, it was, it's a private-led initiative, so the selection was done by a commercial operator in first place. But what is important to retain, without going into figures, because that might be secondary, the important thing is to leave the ability to interconnect to the east and to the west, extending the cable actually to sub-Saharan Africa. This is also a discussion we're having with our colleagues again at DG INPA, with whom we coordinate very well. So for the moment, it's not about how much. I'm not an engineer and I'll be able to pick up and bring you a figure. But the possibility is there. And my colleague was speaking about the anchored example of this global gateway project, meaning that it could be replicated. You know, if this works, there could be extensions in the future and strengthening of even more other communities and other regional networks hooked up to the
Thank you. Maybe one last question, Vadim, for you. I understand that for this time there will be a direct interconnection between the countries and not as it used to be, you know, single links to, you know, to Europe. Can you confirm that?
So,
will there be interconnection directly, between the countries or not?
so there is a connection between each individual country with the EU.
Okay.
And between the countries themselves.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. Okay, please join me to thank Vadim again.
Thank you so much.
So, our next speaker is Madara Ogot. He's the CEO of the Ubuntunet Alliance, which is the regional research and education network for Eastern and Southern Africa. He will be speaking about the Africa Connect 3 project, which is connecting Africa to unlimited possibilities. So, Madara, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Just waiting for the presentation to go up. Okay, I'll figure this out. Okay, just checking. Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. Africa Connect 3, if you look at the title, we could have a whole conference just on it. But I've been told 10 minutes exactly. And we're looking under the context of collaboration. So I'll focus just on a few examples on collaboration under Africa Connect 3. I'm from Ubuntunet Alliance, as has been mentioned. Just a quick one, I'll just use this selfish opportunity because many people may not know so much about Ubuntunet Alliance, so I'll just have a very quick slide. That's the network we run, 26 countries, 16 NRENs, 12 members connected. We're connecting 2 more this year, Ethiopia and Botswana. But the key thing is the last one, sort of cut off on the bottom, which is what the collaboration is. All these networks are fine and well, but the question is, so what? So the next layer is, that's 1,000+ institutions connected, and the key one is the last bullet, serving 4.7 million students and staff. And that is why we are here, and that's the whole point of collaboration. So even as I move forward, I'll be focusing on that last level, the human beings that we are here to serve. Just a quick one under AC3, because that's also the topic. We are upgrading our backbone to about 10 gigabits to 20, and all this upgrade should be done by the end of this year. But I want to spend more time on the Africa Connect 3 project. We are 4 main partners on it: Ubuntunet Alliance, WACREN West Africa, ASREN, where we are, and JANT in Europe. But from that, we connect to all the other regional RENs globally, which means we then connect to all the NRENs globally. And the beautiful part is we then connect to all the institutions, students, and staff globally. Just a quick one on some of the proposed outputs from this initiative, from Africa Connect 3. Again, this project started in 2019. It ends in 2025. So some of these have already been achieved. The key one, of course, was to provide high-speed, affordable connectivity. We're not talking low cost, we're saying affordable, because in different countries, different regions, the prices are indeed different. And again, as we mentioned many times, as you know, these are dedicated networks that connect us to each other as well. But then through these dedicated networks, what services and applications can we provide to the users? In other words, what else is there that we can provide that rides on the networks that we are creating across the world? And as was mentioned by the keynote speaker, how can we build adequate human resource capacities to use these networks, even as they're being set up? And it's at 2 levels. One is the users of the networks, the others are the creators and the maintainers of the same networks in the countries that we work in. As you may be well aware, the private sector is very good at poaching from us, from the academic world, good network engineers. How do you retain them? So that they can serve the academic community as well. And the last bullet is the issue of awareness. And this is where the policymakers come in. And so therefore, how can the role of digital transformation for education and research be raised so that we are all aware of the importance of these networks? So those are some of the proposed outputs. I struggled, what can I do in 10 minutes? I figured the best way is just to give a few case studies which are representative. There are so many stories to tell. I've only picked 4 stories because of the time that is available. The first one is a surgery collaboration between the Mount Sinai Hospital in the US and Kawabwira Surgical Center in Uganda. And here's an example where they're able to do and supervise and work together on surgeries in Uganda by surgeons in the US, and this is being done in real time, because they are riding on Internet 2 in the US's network, which goes on Jan's network, goes on our network, goes on the NREN in Uganda's network, RENU, all the way down to institution as well. So previously, surgeons used to travel to Uganda, spend 2 or 3 weeks there, and then go back after the training. They don't do that anymore. These are now down live because you have access to the high-speed networks between the two countries as well. A completely different example, and was discussed by the previous speaker, the issue of open science. WACREN, which is a West Africa one, Ubuntunet, La Referencia, and Red Clara in South America, signed an MOU last year. And the key thing is, as was discussed, open science is very complex. And there are many issues under open science that require a local context. There are many things that have been done in all these different regions that we may not know about. So how can we all collaborate with each other to enable this beast called open science to actually have a productive output, an impactful output in all our regions? And a little screenshot there was some of the video conferences that were being held before the MOUs were signed across the various regions. And the last sentence there, so how do you domesticate some of these open science policies? How do you domesticate the services infrastructure so that you can actually meet the needs of the local communities across the various countries that all our organizations serve? I guess there's a common theme here that all the discussions we have at the end of the day, they go all the way down to the people that we are trying to serve, not so much just the infrastructure that we are building. The third example is the issue of accessing. We talk about by building these networks, we're able to access global resources, whether they're for education or whether they're for research. One of the key things with accessing these resources is being able to identify who are you as you are trying to access these resources. Under Africa Connect 3, EDUID Africa has been set up. It's a management framework implemented by the partners you see there, so that it allows now the NRENs to develop their national identity federations. And the beauty about that, it therefore allows an institution, if you have the credentials at a university, at a research institution, those credentials are therefore recognized globally. So if I have to log into a service in Europe, in Asia, that is also on EduGain, which is managed by Jean, and about 70 federations are connected to them, then I can simply identify my university, my institution. Once I've identified that, I can simply log in with the same credentials that my university provided to me, and therefore provides access to these resources based on where we are. That has been set up, it's been running. EduID Africa is a member of EduGain already, and now this is being rolled out at the NRENs across the continent to be able to allow their institutions to access the same resources. The last one, which I will look at, is one we're developing at Ubuntunet Alliance for the region, what we're calling Utafiti Africa, Utafiti Swahili for research. And the goal is that if we are going to collaborate, we need funding. And sometimes the hardest part is simply going through one website after another trying to identify where research funding and research opportunities are, or if you identify them, they require you to have collaboration with somebody else in another country, and how do you identify those people to collaborate with? Commercial solutions are available to do this. They tend to be very expensive for institutions to be able to afford. That's what Utafiti Africa tries to do. It's created a personalized database of research funding opportunities, but it also has a research collaboration platform where research can even form private groups as they work on their research as well. This is still in a pilot stage and will be piloted again the whole of 2023 before we go in what we would call a production stage. And it will provide video-on-demand courses supporting Research X. X here could be research management, research grant proposal writing, research methodologies, you get the idea, data management, etc. Oh, I'm sorry, that website is wrong. Don't ignore it. The next slide is the correct one. And again, this is up and running on a pilot stage. We began this in March, and they're sort of an indication of the users, very few spread across the continent. And the theme is going to become clear, which I will talk about on the last slide. Those numbers grew by June, and they have grown by November. But if you notice, The gray box means there are no users, right? If it's red, the users are very low. And there's a couple of things that are common with the gray and red boxes. Can anybody identify what's common in the red and gray boxes? Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to ask questions. Anyway, they are either French-speaking, Arabic-speaking, or Portuguese-speaking. In other words, they're not English-speaking countries. The platform is in English. This is an issue that we have recognized, so it's not that we're not aware of it, and we'll be working with our partners in ASREN to get an Arabic version up and running, our partners in WACREN to get a French-speaking version up and running, and we're looking for a partner to get a Portuguese-speaking version running. Version simply means they're exactly the same, except that you can pick your language and be able to get the same facilities, but in the language that you are comfortable with. And again, this is what we piloted the whole of 2023. I think I've passed my time. Thank you very much.
Yes, you pass your time, but not by too much, only 20 seconds. Do you have a question for Madara? Madara, I see that not all countries in Eastern and Southern Africa are connected to the Ubuntunet backbone, right? So what do you see as the main challenge, to get these countries on board?
Connect the others?
Yes.
Okay. The key issue, we've only connected 14 out of a potential 26. Also to mention that of the 26 islands. But that is the next phase that we are going through. We are looking, our goal is to connect everybody, but it normally starts with the government's recognition of NRENs. And in some of those countries, the governments are still not convinced NRENs are important. NRENs don't exist already. But we are lucky that this year, the government in their educational digital strategy for Africa, NRENs are mentioned, that every country should have an NREN, and all African countries have endorsed it. So we can now use that to work with our partners in the various countries to say, your minister, your president endorsed this, can we have an NREN? So where we're not connected, the primary challenge is acceptance by government of NRENs.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, Vadim.
Can I borrow your microphone? Thank you so much for the presentation. I wanted to ask, you have a strategy for Ubuntunet. I think it might be recent. Can you tell us a little bit more on that, and how did you engage with the local constituencies in the development, if at all?
Okay. Yes, we do have a strategy for one.
And the year, is it recent?
And the other side?
The year, is it recent?
The year, yeah. We do have one. Actually, we've had one for a while. We just created a new one as the former one expired. The former one was, if you go back 5 years from 22, would be 2017, 2022. We're now just starting 23 going forward. I can share that with you. And part of our strategy, as you said, for reaching the local communities, if you will, in all these different countries, is at two levels. We engage their academic institutions, the universities, because typically that's where the kernel of an NREN will start from. We engage their Minister of Education, because normally they're the ones now who would spearhead it to convince the other ministries, the government. And we engage the World Bank. The reason why we engage the World Bank is in most of our countries in our region, which is for Ubuntunet, the World Bank has been a key financial catalyst to get the NRENs up and running within the countries themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madara. So please join me to thank him. A very short one then.
Yeah, very short one. Just I am curious, because based on this survey that we have performed within the African Strategy for Fundamental Applied Physics, we get that from the community. They have really a big issue to access the internet. So again and again, there is a gap between the community in different levels, lower and medium and high level, and reach any initiative. I guess we need to work hard to establish a very strong link and to follow up if really these the base that we need to work on is working correctly. Thank you.
So it was
I agree fully.
It was not a short question, but I want a short answer.
No, I agree 100%. That at the end of the day, if you can build all these networks, but if you don't start at the bottom where the need is, there'll be idle networks.
Thank you very much.
100%.
Thank you. Please, our next speaker is Heba Gaber. She is a Research and Innovation Officer at the European Union Delegation to Egypt. Please, Heba, you have the floor.
So hello, my name is Heba Gaber. I'm the Research and Innovation Regional Officer. I belong to the European Commission, Directorate General for Research and Innovation, and I'm based at the EU Delegation in Cairo. I'd like to thank WACREN for the organization and the invitation and for the opportunity to share with you opportunities for international cooperation, research and innovation under our program, Horizon Europe. But before I start, maybe with the raise of hands, if you know about FP7, you heard about FP7, just raise your hand. Horizon 2020? Okay, Horizon Europe? So we are not trying to confuse everyone by changing the name of the program every 7 years, but those are all the previous versions of the EU program for funding research and innovation. Now it's called Horizon Europe. Between 2021-2027, we will remain to call it Horizon Europe. I have the challenge to tell you about this program that has a budget of close to 95 billion, not million, billion euros in 5 minutes. So I guess the best way is to ask the questions and answer them. So if it is the EU program for funding research and innovation, why are we presenting it here? Because it's an open program, meaning that entities from any country in the world can participate in the program. Luckily, many of the countries presented here today, neighborhood countries, perhaps low and middle income countries, are not only able to participate, but are also able to participate and receive funding. What is the difference? While the program is open to all countries from the world to participate, like entities from the USA, for example, can participate, they're not necessarily eligible to receive funding. They can be partnered in the consortium, but they need to find the funding for themselves. This is not the case for North African countries, Southern Mediterranean countries, and the majority of low and middle income countries in the world, including African countries. So the reason we're presenting it today is that we launched our new work program just last week on the 8th of December. Okay, the European Commission uses terminology that's not familiar to everyone. So what is a work program? The work program is our manual, our catalog for what are we going to do throughout the 2 years duration. So we launch a work program every 2 years. So the work program 2021-2022 ended, and just last week we launched the work program 2023-2024. So, I mentioned that the program is open. I'll try to be very quick and go through. So this is the structure of the program. The structure of the program, I will not go through it in details. I'm leaving the slides. But what does it mean, the structure of the program? Okay, we said that any entity from any country can participate in the program. We call entities legal entities, again using the European Commission terminology. Legal entities meaning, in Arabic, جهة ذات كيان قانوني. What does that mean? A private company, a civil society organization, a university, a ministry, a public entity, any legal entity can participate in the program. We do not have a constraint. So whether you work in the private sector or university or research center, you can participate. Of course, when you have a budget that huge to structure, the program basically covers everything. So whether you're a researcher in the area of nanotechnology, cultural heritage, working on migration, energy, food, environment, you will find calls for proposals that match your interests. I will not go through details, but this is how the program is structured. Mainly 3 pillars. The first pillar is concerned with excellent science. That's the pillar concerned with training and mobility of researchers. Basically, in very few words, any researcher from any nationality in the world can apply for those grants that support researchers to come and do the research hosted by a European institution. or the Marie Sklodowska-Curie Actions, which is the very, very famous instrument in the southern Mediterranean region, supporting career development and mobility of researchers of, again, any nationality, to do doctoral programs, to support fellowships, exchange, incoming mobility, outcoming mobility. And then pillar 2, concerned with, let's say, thematic research and structured around what we call clusters, but basically thematic researchers around starting with health and covering all the thematic areas that I mentioned. And then pillar 3, the pillar concerned basically with supporting innovation. So I mentioned that the program is open. Some, of course, EU countries are members of the program, but there are also some non-EU countries that we call associated countries. Those are countries that contribute to the budget of the program, but are not EU countries, such as Tunisia, for example. But the difference between an associated country and a non-associated country is that some of the pillars, very few, are only open to associated countries. But the main pillars are open to all countries to participate. And as I mentioned, southern Mediterranean countries in principle are all eligible to participate and receive funding under the vast majority of the instruments. So what is the work program that we funded, that we launched last week? Of course, every work program has a budget. The work program that we launched, 2023-2024, has a budget of 13.5 billion euros to support researchers and innovators. And you will find information about the program under this active link. As I said, I'm leaving the slides. So what do you need to do in order to participate? You will need to visit that portal towards the end. See the FNT portal. FNT is short for Funding and Tendering Portal. This is the one-stop shop for all EU funding programs. You just need to click on the portal and you will see we do not open all the calls at one time, but we publish all the calls now. So under the portal you can click open calls, forthcoming calls, or closed calls. If you click on closed calls, you will find the calls that were under the previous work program. If you click open calls, you will find the calls that are open now, where you can submit a proposal now. And then the forthcoming calls will tell you the calls that will open till the end of 2024. Why do we launch a work program, a 2 years work program? Because this is a very competitive program. It takes time to work on a proposal. It takes time to find partners. It takes time to prepare a proposal. So the first deadlines are around March, and I think we are already late. It takes quite a long time I'm not discouraging anyone to apply, but I realize it takes time to prepare a proposal. But you will know all the calls that will open till the end of 2024. So you have time to contact partners. You need at least 3 EU partners in your consortium to be eligible to apply in different EU member states. And on top of that, you can add any number of partners you wish, depending on the call, of course. Going to the question of the colleague from Morocco about co-create or bottom-up approach. So, okay, this is a European program, you're launching calls and you're telling us, okay, apply. But this is not how we work with all regions from the world. The calls that are geographically targeted, meaning that calls that are relevant to the Mediterranean region, or calls that are relevant to Africa, where we are encouraging cooperation with a certain part of the world, do not just come from the European Commission. We have strong policy dialogue with the African Union. We have a strong policy dialogue with the UFM, where we jointly agree on the priorities. What do we want to do together? For example, in the context of the Mediterranean region, we agreed to work together in the areas for research and innovation, of course, on health, renewable energy, and climate change. We agreed that, okay, all areas are important, but for our current and future priorities, we need to focus on those 3 areas. We developed roadmaps for what do we want to do, because scientific cooperation it's a recipe that we need many ingredients, one of which is connectivity that my colleague Vadim presented. We need connectivity. We need open science, we need exchange of data, we need funding instruments. So we developed roadmaps on what is needed to make research and innovation in those 3 priority areas happen, how to valorize it. And those roadmaps went through stakeholders consultation to all research and innovation stakeholders in the region. We gathered the feedback, and then we finalized the roadmaps, and we got them adopted at the highest political level at the UFM, or the Union for the Mediterranean Ministerial. Going back to the funding, one of the instruments, as I said, one of the ingredients of the recipe is funding. So I tried yes, okay, I will leave this. Those are the links. This is the Horizon Europe website, our international cooperation website, and again, the funding and tender portal. And this is an example of the calls in the 3 slides, where we extracted the calls, for example, that encourage cooperation or that are relevant to the cooperation with the Mediterranean region based on the agreed priorities. You will find that the vast majority of those calls are in the areas of renewable energy and climate change. Those will open throughout the work program, 2023-2024, with different deadlines. And yes, this is more information about the Commission and how we operate. Our international cooperation website again, so that you can easily follow the links. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope I did not say much.
No, less than 1 minute, so it's fine. Thank you very much, Heba. Any question for Heba? Yes, please.
Thank you, Heba, for the quick tour. But of course, you need a 1-hour session to have a question and answer for it.
Yes.
A quick question is, are individuals allowed to apply, or does it have to be entities?
Individuals are allowed to apply only for the postdoctoral fellowships under the Marie Sklodowska-Curie, or the doctoral fellowships in association with a host institution in Europe. But for the collaborative research, it has to be a legal entity, not an individual.
Okay, and the combination is 3 to 1, like you have 1 from South Mediterranean and 3 from EU?
No, 3 EU as a minimum in the consortium. Sometimes the members in the consortium can reach 10 or 12 entities. A minimum are like 3 entities from 3 different EU member states or associated countries. But then on top of that, you can add as many as you want.
But the minimum is 3?
3 from the EU and or associated countries.
And from the South?
No, it doesn't matter. Like those 3, you meet the minimum requirement, and then depending on the topic, the proposal, the beauty of a call for proposal, and it's different, the difference between a call for proposal and a request for services, for example, is that we identify an expected impact. What are we trying to achieve? And then the design of how you're going to achieve the impact is up to the applicant.
Okay.
Like the 3 members of the EU member state, like 3 partners in the consortium of the member state is the minimum. You meet the minimum requirement, you design the proposal, you add as many partners as you see needed as per the proposal to achieve the impact, and then you have the application meeting the minimum requirements. But again, this is the generic rule. For each and every call, you will find a link called eligibility conditions.
And you have to go there.
check the eligibility conditions for that particular call.
Thank you.
Okay, quick ones, please.
Yes. You hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Hamad Taha, Egyptian Atomic Energy Authority. And my question is, do you have any kind of fund, the calls that doesn't expire, that is always open? Like, because it's very difficult for young researchers who would like to establish their own labs or to start a new nucleus or a new trend of research to compete with more experienced ones within the big calls that you launch, like this one you are speaking about. So I'm looking for like small grants to just give initiative for young researchers, and I think this one doesn't need to have a specific deadline. Do you have any kind of this type of calls, or you don't have?
We do not have that initiative in particular, as I said. But the program continues. Like after 2023-24, we will launch a new program, 25-26, and so on, and then a new program. For supporting startups, for example, we have different types of programs. Like we have a regional program funded, I think, with a budget of 10 million euros under DG NEAR that supports innovation enablers in the region. That is a program that supports like technology parks, incubators, accelerators, and through this program, those enablers get to support startups, whether by providing capacity building or direct small grants, but not this particular program. However, saying that, any legal entity can participate. Like if you have a startup that is an established legal entity, you can apply, get what is called a PIC number, to register and get a number, and then you can apply for the calls. We do not have a constraint on the size of the organization.
Some legal issues in institutions in Egypt are not allowed to make startups, because most of institutions are governmental, so they are not allowed to establish startups. This is another challenge for us.
So this was the last follow-up question. You can liaise with Heba thereafter. Please, Heba, if you can comment on what... You can comment on what you just said, or no comments?
No, but I'm not very familiar with the legal framework in Egypt in terms of creating, you mean spin-offs from publicly funded research. This I'm not very familiar with how it evolved. Honestly, I know that there have been changes in the law recently allowing such spin-offs to take place, but this is kind of out of my scope a bit, so I cannot just entirely comment on that.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 more presentations to go. Last question, Helga.
Thank you. Researchers typically know each other. They know who they want to collaborate with, so that's easy, but not always. So do you also offer some kind of matchmaking opportunities?
Yes, we do not provide matchmaking opportunities, but we created what is called a network of national contact points. What we do is that we request all countries to nominate national contact points that match the structure of the program, meaning a national contact point for Marie Curie, one for health, one for culture, creativity, one for environment, like a network of people nominated by the country. What do we do with this national network of national contact points is that the structure is mirrored in all countries. Like if Egypt, for example, all Morocco, has nominated the network of contact points, the same structure is mirrored in France, Spain, everywhere. And we publish the names and contact information of those people on the funding and tender portal. So if you click on your country, wherever you are, you will find the names of the national contact points. If you are building a consortium and you are missing, for example, you want to add to your consortium a small company specialized in a certain type of membrane, and you want to find that in Spain. You can find the national contact point for that particular thematic area and contact them directly so that they help you find the partner you're looking for. So you can look at the network and contact the national contact point that will be able to find you the right partner. Of course, the question is, I hear it many times, is that we communicate, we contact those national contact points, they do not necessarily respond to us. And my answer is always very clear. If you are very specific about what you want, like you identify the call, I want to apply for this call and I'm missing a partner that has that particular profile. Normally, it's much easier for them to get back to you. In many cases, the request for collaboration or the request for support is very generic, that they cannot really help. But if you are specific in terms of the profile you're looking for and the call you want to apply for, the higher the chance that they will be able to help.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I had one question, but you already answered it. So the minimum of 3 partners have to come from 3 different countries.
Yes.
That's correct.
3 EU member states?
Yeah, the EU member states. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So our next speaker is Baher Esmat. He is Managing Director, ICANN, Turkey. So Baher, you have the floor.
مساء الخير عليكم جميعا. So I think we're going to switch topics here. I'm not from the academic community, but I also realize that most of those in the room are from the region. So in that case, I think I'm going to do my talk in Arabic, and maybe our guests can use the headsets for translation. أنا اسمي باهر اسمت. موضوعنا النهارده هو مزيج من التكنولوجي واللغة، وعشان موضوع اللغة ده تحديدا أنا فضلت إن أنا أتكلم عربي. بنتكلم على حاجة بنقول عليها meaningful access للإنترنت. طول الوقت بنتكلم على الإنترنت access للإنترنت، لكن مش دايما بنفكر في الجزئية الخاصة باللغة وأهمية اللغة، وإحنا مش بس بنتواصل مع بعض، وإنما كمان إحنا بنتواصل أونلاين أو بنعمل أي حاجة على الإنترنت. ويمكن موضوع اللغة على الإنترنت واستخدام التكنولوجيا بشكل عام موضوع مش جديد، موضوع يمكن من بداية الإنترنت في التسعينات، ويمكن اتقطع فيه شوط كبير في بعض المناطق من العالم. يمكن منطقتنا العربية مازال في شغل كتير مطلوب إن هو يحصل. وفي الحقيقة إن الأورجنايزيشن اللي أنا بشتغل فيها اللي هي اسمها ICANN، وممكن يكون معظم حضراتكم ما يعرفش عنها، هي مؤسسة غير ربحية بتخدم أكثر من 5 مليار مستخدم للإنترنت. كل واحد فينا بيستخدم الإنترنت بأي شكل كان، محتاج إن هو يوصل لمكان معين على الإنترنت، يعمل معاملة معينة أيا كان نوعها، محتاج إن هو يبعت إيميل أو يستخدم سوشيال ميديا أو موبايل أب. في عناوين، أنا متأكد إنه لو في أي حد تقني في الأوضة من المهندسين اللي بيشتغلوا في الشبكات وغيره هيبقى عارف الكلام ده. في نظام للعناوين موجود هو اللي بيخلينا نقدر إن إحنا نوصل للمكان اللي إحنا عايزينه أونلاين، والأجهزة اللي إحنا بنستخدمها تبقى كونكتد أونلاين. ICANN هي الجهة المسؤولة عن إدارة نظام العناوين ده على مستوى العالم. ولما بنتكلم على اللغة في الحقيقة الجزئية اللي بتعنينا كICANN اللي إحنا بنحاول إن إحنا نشتغل فيها وإن إحنا يعني to make it available للناس اللي هي محتاجاها، إن العناوين كمان تبقى باللغات المختلفة، مش فقط المحتوى اللي موجود على الشبكات. شكل العناوين اللي احنا ممكن نكون على درايه بيها بنستخدمها كل يوم عناوين زي .com .net وغيرها من العناوين، لكن كمان في عناوين بلغات مختلفه موجوده بقى لها اكثر من 10 سنين بتستخدم، ومنها عناوين باللغه العربيه. ويمكن في منطقتنا العربيه لو نبص على الخريطه هنا هنلاقي معظم الدول العربيه من موريتانيا في الغرب لغايه عمان في الشرق عندها عناوين بتمثل اسماء دولها باللغه العربيه. يمكن استخدام العناوين دي ما هواش منتشر، ويمكن عشان كده انا موجود مع حضراتكم النهارده، وده احد ايضا الموضوعات اللي احنا كICANN بنشتغل فيها مع اسهم بقالنا كذا سنه، بنحاول ان احنا نتواصل ونشتغل مع شبكات العلوم والبحث العلمي والجامعات في المنطقه، بحيث ان احنا نشوف ازاي ممكن نتعاون وندفع ب يعني استخدام عناوين باللغه العربيه في منطقتنا العربيه، وبالتالي يكون في مزيد من استخدام الفعال للإنترنت بشكل عام. طيب ليه موضوع العناوين بالعربي مهم؟ وليه احنا ممكن نكون محتاجينه في منطقتنا لما تقريبا كلنا بنستخدم الإنترنت النهارده وعندنا عناوين إيميل كلها مكتوبة بحروف لاتينية؟ في الحقيقة إنه الموضوع العربي مهم غالبا مش لينا احنا الناس اللي موجودة في الأوضة هنا، ويمكن ما يكونش مهم لناس كتير بتستخدم الإنترنت النهارده، لكن في نوعين تانيين من الناس او مجموعتين من المستخدمين اللي موجودين النهارده اللي بيستخدموا التكنولوجيا بالفعل، بيستخدموها باللغه العربيه، ودي حاجه انا بشوفها في مصر، بشوفها في دول كتيره في منطقتنا، انه بيستخدموا الموبايل كانترفيس كابلكيشن ككونتنت، بيستخدموا بالعربي، بيستخدموا سوشيال ميديا بالعربي، بعضهم بيكتب بالعربي فعليا، بعضهم بيكتب لغه عربيه باحرف لاتينيه، لكن في النهايه العربي جزء اساسي من استخدام عدد كبير من مستخدمي الانترنت في منطقتنا. المجموعه الثانيه هم الناس اللي لسه ما هماش على الانترنت النهارده، هم الناس اللي ممكن يبقى عندهم حاجز منعهم انهم يستخدموا التكنولوجيا، هم الناس اللي ممكن عشان يعمل معامله حكوميه ومحتاج يسجل فيها بعنوان بريد الكتروني ومش هيعرف يكتبه، بيروح لابنه او بنته وبتسجل له عنوان عشان يقدروا يعملوا له المعامله الالكترونيه. ففي مجموعه اخرى ما بتستخدمش الانترنت النهارده واللغه عامل اساسي ليها. وجود العناوين باللغه العربيه مع وجود محتوى باللغه العربيه هيساعد انه يخلي الناس اللي في منطقتنا، عدد كبير منهم ممكن يكون معظمهم بالمناسبه بيستخدموا الانترنت بشكل اللي هو بنقول عليه meaningful access للانترنت، انه بشكل ايا كانت ترجمه meaningful access، وانما يكون فعلا بيستخدموا الانترنت يعني بطريقه كامله باللغه اللي هم بيعرفوها، اللغه اللي هم بيتكلموها. الموضوع ده ما هواش صعب من الناحيه التقنيه، لانه العناوين اوريدي موجوده باللغه العربيه، لكن المشكله الاساسيه اللي موجوده ان معظم التطبيقات اللي احنا بنستخدمها النهارده سواء على الموبايل او على الويب او على السوشيال ميديا، معظمها مش بيتعرف على العناوين دي. المشكله دي مش بس في العربي بالمناسبه، الصينيين بيتكلموا في نفس المشكله، الهند بتتكلم في نفس المشكله، واحنا كايكان بنشتغل مع الكوميونيتيز في البلدان المختلفه على حل المشاكل دي وتسهيل حلها. والحلول من الناحيه التقنيه مره اخرى التقنيين اللي موجودين في الاوضه هيعرفوا انه في لايرز بنشتغل عليها، بنبتدي من الستاندردز بنطلع لغايه الابلكيشنز، وعلى كل لاير مطلوب ان يبقى في حلول موجوده ان هي توفر وتسهل استخدام العناوين دي على البرامج المختلفه. الايميل بالمناسبه كخدمه او كتطبيق هو من اهم واكثر التطبيقات استخداما على الانترنت لغايه النهارده. وكتير من المعاملات اللي احنا بنعملها على الانترنت بتحتاج ان احنا نسجل بعنوان بريد الكتروني. النهارده معظم يمكن 80% من الايميل سيرفرز اللي موجوده على مستوى العالم ما بتفهمش غير عناوين بريد بالاحرف اللاتينيه. فقط 20% اللي بيقدر ان هو يميز عناوين بالعربي على سبيل المثال، وبالتالي في شغل كتير برضو محتاج ان احنا نعمله في الايميل. في جروب موجود يعني بيشتغل من خلال الايكان اسمه اليونيفرسال اكسبتنس ستيرنج جروب، في اكتر من 120 شركه بتشارك فيه، في حكومات بتشارك فيه، في جامعات بتشارك فيه، علشان بيعملوا في الحقيقه حاجتين، بيعملوا توعيه، والحاجه الثانيه اللي بيعملوها بيقدموا حلول لمشكله انه العناوين اللي باللغات الاخرى تبقى مفهومه على التطبيقات المختلفه. طبعا في تفاصيل كتير يمكن مش هقدر او مش هلحق ان انا اتكلم فيها، لكن لو في اي اسئله احب ان اانا احاول اجاوب عليها. دي دراسه بنعملها كل سنه على عمليه القبول للعناوين الايميل باللغات المختلفه. هنلاقي منها العربي على الويب سايتس الاكثر استخداما في العالم، يمكن جربنا في كل بلد حوالي 1000 توب ويب سايت. بالنسبه لعناوين البريد اللي بالعربي في حدود 10-12% فقط من الويب سايتس دي تقدر تفهم عناوين بالعربي. النسبه مش زايده كتير لو بنبص على الصيني اللي هو البار الثاني من فوق، برضو في حدود 10-15%. ده يورينا انه في شغل كتير محتاجين ان احنا نعمله. دي دراسه اخرى اتعملت على الايميل سيرفرز، ولو نبص على الكولم اللي في النص بالنسبه للغه العربيه هنلاقي انه فقط 20% من الايميل سيرفرز في العالم النهارده بتفهم وتقدر تتعامل مع ايميلز مكتوبه بالكامل باللغه العربيه. دي تول موجوده اونلاين نقدر ان احنا نحط فيها الايميل ادرس بتاعنا، وتقدر تقول لنا اذا كان السيرفر اللي احنا بنشتغل عليه، الايميل سيرفر اللي احنا بنشتغل عليه بيفهم العربي ولا لا. في مبادرات يعني عددها في الحقيقه معقول جدا موجود في بلدان مختلفة، منها بلدان في منطقتنا سواء في المنطقة العربية أو في أفريقيا، لكن في الحقيقة ما زلنا بنطمع في المزيد، بنطمع في مزيد من المتطوعين ومن الجهات اللي نقدر نحن نشتغل معاها. وهقول لحضراتكم إيه اللي احنا ممكن نعمله مع حضراتكم كجهات في قطاع البحث العلمي والأكاديمي. بنقدر ان احنا نقدم طبعا تريننج وعندنا كاباسيتي بيلدينج بروجرامز مختلفة، لكن كمان نقدر نشتغل على مشروعات مع الطلبة، سواء كانوا طلبة في اندر جراديوت او بوست جراديوت. نقدر نشتغل على تكنيكال سيت ابس ل لابس او ايميل سيستمز، نقدر ان احنا نجرب عليها اللغات المختلفة. ممكن يكون تركيزنا في المنطقة بتاعتنا على اللغة العربية، ممكن ان احنا ننظم هاكاثونز للطلبة. ممكن الجامعات والمعاهد اللي بتشتغل في التعليم انه يكون عندهم برامج اوريدي موجوده ليها علاقه بالتكنولوجي وبالكمبيوتر نتوركس، يقدروا ان هم يطوروها ويحطوا عليها او يزودوا عليها بعض الموديولز الخاصه بالموضوع اللي احنا بنتكلم عليه. اوريدي في زي ما قلت تكنيكال تريننجز مختلفه، ويمكن اتكلمت سريعا على البروجكتس اللي نقدر ان احنا نشتغل فيها مع حضراتكم. اوريدي في بعض الجامعات لكن مش في منطقتنا العربيه في الحقيقه بنعمل معها حاجات شبيهه. هيبقى عندنا خلال الربع الاولاني من السنه الجايه UA Day، يوم عالمي لليونيفرسال اكسبتنس لموضوع الدومين نيمز ده، والتاريخ هيحدد قريبا. وفي برضو مجموعه من النشاطات المختلفه اللي ممكن الجهات التعليميه وجهات البحث العلمي تنظمها معانا في اليوم ده. ودي مجموعه من الاونلاين ماتيريال موجوده، واللينكس حضراتكم تقدروا ترجعوا لها لو في محتاجين اي معلومات اضافيه. شكرا.
Thank you very much. I will allow only one question, a short one, if there is any. Okay, if not, I just wanted to make a comment because you started saying that, okay, this is academia, but I wanted to, in your last slides, you showed that academia are involved. But I use myself to be involved in working groups, ICANN working groups, and on IDN, for instance, and also, until now, many CCTLDs, country code top-level domains, are actually managed by universities. Until now, yes. Okay. This was just a comment. Thank you very much. So thank you again. So our next speaker, Sylvia Fiore, she is Communications Officer at GEON, Netherlands. She will be speaking about Arab Emirates and their role towards the achievement of the UN Sustainable Development Goals.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I'd like you to spend the next 10 minutes or so thinking about how your NRN, your research center, your university is contributed to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals that are also known as the UN SDGs. So let me give you some context. You might be familiar with this bright color wheel, or maybe with only one or two of the goals that are more closely related to your work. And this is the wheel of the SDGs. They are a universal set of goals, targets, and indicators that states around the world use to frame their agendas and policies. They are an urgent call to action to achieve a better and more sustainable world. And a very important requirement is that every actor in our society they all join forces and take action together to actually end the global challenges that we want to solve. There are 17 goals that break down in 169 targets that should all be achieved by 2030. But you can see on the wheel, some of them are about ending extreme poverty or fixing climate change, and all of these wonderful goals. They are wonderful, but they might seem very far from what the NRNs are doing on a daily basis. So you might be left wondering, but why are we talking about them? Why do they matter to my NRN? Well, as the Deputy Minister of Education of Palestine said earlier, they are really at the center of a heated debate among the among the policymakers and the decision makers. They have attracted their interest. So it's really important for the NRNs to tell their stories through the lenses of SDGs in a way that the world will understand. So they can attract funding from local and global organizations. And they're also, the SDGs are a wonderful opportunity for the NRNs to align projects and activity to their stakeholders' needs. And because one organization alone cannot solve an entire challenge, it's really important to join forces and do this all together. So they are also an opportunity to attract and nurture partnerships. I would like to give you some examples about on how the Arab NRNs are actually contributing to the SDGs. Let's imagine for a second a student living in an isolated area that during the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, is significantly hit by the restrictions and cannot continue her education. Well, she wouldn't be able to continue the education if it wasn't for Eduroam being rolled out at the town's public library. So she can go to the library and continue with her studies. So she actually graduates in STEM and she goes on to secure a job at the local lab where she's able to conduct groundbreaking research thanks to the connectivity that the NRN provides to the research center. And thanks to her job and her education opportunities, she's an active contributor and an active actor in our society. And just with this little story, I've actually mentioned 4 or 5 SDGs to which the NRN alone has contributed. But let's take a step back, and I'd like to give you just some theoretical context. So the NRNs are contributing to SDGs in 2 different ways, directly and indirectly. Directly means through a direct service provision. For example, they are providing affordable, high-speed and reliable connectivity to universities, for example. And by doing so, they are making education more accessible to students. So this is a direct benefit. But they're also contributing indirectly by what is also called the multiplier effect. And what does this mean? Well, by the effects of one activity are actually multiplied, and they create extra opportunities for the community. And this is actually what I just mentioned a minute ago. By providing connectivity to research centers, the NRNs are enabling research. It is true, they're not doing the research themselves, but without that connectivity, the research wouldn't be possible. Here on this wheel, you can see I have highlighted just a few of the SDGs that the NRNs contribute to directly, and I'd like to give you very quickly some examples. SDG number 4, quality education. So we all know that the NRNs are leaping barriers to education in the Arab world through e-learning. Thanks to the lower connectivity prices and the user-dedicated services, they are helping the higher education institutions to give a better experience to the students. And this was ever so true during the COVID-19 pandemic. The NRNs have basically proved their crucial role in the existence of the higher education institutions. On the slide you can see some examples. The Arab NRNs have provided customized video conferencing tools and e-learning platforms to the university, even where there was little interest initially, like Lebanon or Oman. Or again, in Lebanon, Tech Care provided discounted data bundles to local students so they could access courses on their mobile phones because they weren't allowed to go to the campuses. Or another wonderful development was the adoption and rollout of Eduroam for local institutions in Oman and more recently also Somalia. SDG number 5, it is achieving gender equality. So it is true that there is still a lot of progress to do in the Arab region and the Middle East when it comes to the presence of female researchers and academics in the field. But I'd like to point out the shining example of Tunisia. That's the first country in Africa where 55% of the researchers and the academics are actually women. And thanks to through the Africa Connect 3 project, I've had the honor to interview and also read about incredible and outstanding female role models. And I can think, for example, of Professor Farida Fassi that's here in the room, or all the women at the helm of CCK in Tunisia, and also Dr. Jihan Kamel from the Sesame Center. SDG number 8, decent work and economic growth. The NRNs are contributing to this SDG through providing training and courses to their personnel, but also to the students, in order to help them become better equipped to then join the job market. And I can think, for example, of the 5-month-long workshop that ASREN provided to NRNs applications and system engineers last year, so they could be better equipped to build and then deploy a national federation in order eventually to join EduROM. Or in Tunisia, CCK is running the Campus Network project that's offering full Wi-Fi coverage all across campuses, facilitating the creation of incubators that then eventually create innovation. And there are so many other examples of workshops and trainings that other NRNs, also all across sub-Saharan Africa, are providing to the students. SDG number 9. This is considered to be the backbone of all SDGs because, without infrastructure, nothing is possible. Innovation is not possible. And this is ever so true when there is a new NRN that's being established or when there is a connectivity upgrade, because there are even more benefits brought to the local users. And talking about infrastructure, it's impossible not to mention the incredible progress that has been done in the field of open science and open access, as well as cloud and HPC, all across Africa and the Arab world. And the last one is SDG number 17, partnerships for the goals. So you all know that NRNs are, by definition, associations of members that enable partnerships. So here, the keyword is co-creation, because they, on a daily basis, partner with like-minded organizations like the European Commission, World Bank, Internet Society, we heard so many today, to try and solve major societal challenges on a number of fields. And so this is not only on a multi-stakeholder level, but also cross-continental and cross-sector. So I'm mindful of the time. I will very quickly go through a couple of examples for the indirect support, what I mentioned earlier, that's also known as the multiplier effect. So I'd like to mention the work done by Enstinet, the Egyptian NRN, that provides connectivity to NARS, that monitors sandstorms and also issues timely alerts to asthma sufferers. So as I said earlier, it's not the NRN itself that does this research and monitors the sandstorms, but it thanks to the connectivity that's basically making it happen. And the same is true for Tech Care, that during the COVID pandemic provided connectivity to the medical center of the American University of Beirut, which allowed the medical center to launch an online platform that enabled patients to secure remote consultations with their doctors, so they didn't have any disruptions to their medical services. So what's next? I'm coming from a communication perspective, and I've just mentioned, I mentioned a lot of examples, but there are so many more. So my call to action today, obviously, is to ask you to share your story. To share your story in a way that the world understands. And what I mean by this is through the lenses of SDG. So really highlighting what your NRNs have been doing in this regard. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvia. I will allow one question, if there is any. No question? I see that. Okay, please.
No, we're still there, and thank you so much. How do you measure the performance and report back on the implementation?
I didn't hear you.
How do you report back on the implementation?
Oh, well, yeah. So for the Africa Connect 3 project specifically, we have been running an initiative together with my colleagues at WACREN, ASREN, and the Ubuntunet Alliance, and that started all the way earlier this year in 2022, and then will be run also next year. We have started with a brainstorming session, our team, collecting concrete examples that I just mentioned to actually evidence the contributions, and our end goal, the output of this initiative will be to have a comprehensive position paper that then we want to present at conferences, but also to submit to regional and global organizations that are working in the same field.
Okay. Thank you very much. So last but not least, our last speaker, George Konis, is Managing Director, Cyprus Research Education Network, Cyprus, who is speaking about how GEAN can support the sustainability of NRENs, building blocks of a business model for all NRENs. But maybe, George, before you start, normally coffee break is over, so unless the organizers find an arrangement, I will propose that the speakers take you to the bar thereafter, after the last session. So please, George.
Thank you for the invitation. As you said, I'm George Konis. I'm the Managing Director of SciNet, the NREN of Cyprus, and head of the Academic CSIRT of Cyprus, and also member of the Board of Directors of the ZEANT Association. I will start with the first question. Is about NREN. Why NRENs? Sometimes we take for granted that we need NRENs and that the governments around the world, or to be more precise, the stakeholders, understand why we need NRENs. This is not always the case. You have to inform and show to your stakeholders what are the benefits of NREN, why NREN is different from a commercial telco. And what is the most important is you can see the needs for scientific collaboration, for connectivity. The most important is the NRENs are a source of innovation and in many countries are treated as assets for economic growth and prosperity. That means that there is a return of investment. When you invest in an NREN, you get something back. We have NRENs around the globe, but in different countries, NRENs are in different stages. This is the stages of development of NRENs. This is the capability maturity model. So first of all, you have to know in your country in which stage you are, in which level, in order to take the appropriate actions. I'm going a little fast. Until now, I have heard about research, about education, but mainly for universities. This is not only the case, the universities. As you can see, these data are from the ZEANT Compendium, who has all the information for the European NRENs. As you can see, in many countries, apart from the universities, research institutions, NRENs support cultural institutions, hospitals, primary schools, governments, like for example Belgium. In Belgium, they have specific services for the governmental sector. So you have to take all this into account. If you ask my opinion, I apologize for the Greek, I will translate it in English. This is an effective network of ownership for the stakeholders. You have the connections, you have the cloud, you have the data centers, you have the AI, you have voice and data, you have the security, you have the high performance computing, and also the digital services. Also, what is important to keep in mind is that NRENs are not against the commercial telcos. Actually, we are collaborating with them. We are leasing lines from them. The NRENs don't implement their own network. Usually, they rent their network. Another important issue is the funding model. As you can see again, this is the data from Europe. We have government subsidized NRENs, mixed. That means that get funding from the government, but also from their members. And some, like SciNet, are just user finance. That means that the government does not give any funds to SciNet. This is not bad in some cases, because it connects also with the strategic autonomy. As you can see here, what is the government's role in NREN's governance? I will talk about the business model later, but you have also to take in mind that there are two aspects that are not part of the business model. Is the strategic autonomy, which means who takes the decisions for the NREN. Is it, can see here, is it the NREN by itself? Is it the government? Is it the stakeholders? And also, what is important also, it is the IT autonomy. Some NRENs are IT autonomous, like for example GRNet, they have about 50 engineers. Some others, like the Austrian one, the ACONET, they don't have any engineers because the IT universities, the IT departments of the universities do the job for the NREN. So the first step for every NREN, in my opinion, is to have its place in the governance structure of research and innovation. Here you can see what is the current structure in Cyprus with the chief scientist, the government, the national board for research, education, and all this stuff. And hopefully, what will be the case in January with the decision of the Council of Ministers, when you see Kiavi sign it, will be part of this structure. If you are not part of the research information structure, it's too difficult to get funding by the government. So, in my opinion, there is a misunderstanding. All the NRENs are not non-profit organizations who are not commercial, and the minority of NRENs are governmental institutions. But this does not mean that we don't need a strategic and business model and plan in order to be sustainable. This is a very useful tool for all the NRENs, in my opinion, to help them prepare their business model. As you can see here, there are key questions. There are 9 blocks, the key partners, the key activities, the customer relationships, the value propositions, the channels, the customer segments, the cost structure, and the revenue streams. Most of the people think that the most important block of all this is the revenue stream. It's not. The most important block is the value proposition. What you bring for the community. Otherwise, you will not have revenues. So first of all, learn about your key partners, for example, ZEANT or ASNET, which is our strategic partner in the area. Found about your customer segments, the channels, how you will offer the services, and this will create the revenue streams. I try to be fast in order to have time for questions. For example, the Cyprus scene. In Cyprus is a small island, so we have a small research and innovation community. And also, it's an open market for telcos. So we can't compete the prices of the commercial telcos. We must differentiate, otherwise we don't have any way to exist. And the only way for Cyprus to differentiate, it was through services. Specific services for the research and innovation ecosystem. And this, we've done it with the ZEANT. As you can see, because I heard all day about connectivity. Connectivity means nothing without services. You need services that are bandwidth hungry. And when you have this kind of services, then you can see the differences and the advantages of the research network. I could talk for hours about the differences between the research networks and the commercial ones, but we can do it another time. As you can see, the first one has to do with network. It's only just one part. The network support. For example, network management as a service. This is a service that Zean runs centrally in Poznan and can help all the small institutions, not only the NRENs, but also the universities, that they don't have IT department, to have an overview of their services. Actually, it's a platform. I heard before about the EduGame that you are using in Africa. It's very easy to implement in academia, which is the next step, in order to have connection also with commercial companies. I heard also that in Africa you are offering video on demand and all these services. If you are paying for Zoom license, you can use the EduMeet, which is an open source. It's free and you can implement it in every country. And this is what we are using to have an example, what we are using in Cyprus. With Green is the service that we have adopted. With Red, we are waiting for the new circuits in order to implement them. And also there are some under development that we are participating also. So, to conclude my points for the discussion, I think the business model canvas is a useful tool for all the NRENs. As I said before, the value proposition of NREN is what users' problems are solved by using NREN services, and the sustainability of NRENs could be accomplished with the support of the ZEAN, and of course, as I said before, ASREN. And I want my last phrase to be, you have to keep in mind that ZEAN, above all, is a network of people, that they are only willing to help every NREN around the globe in order to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. I would take one question, if there is any. Yes, please. Please keep it short. Microphone.
I'm sure that we help of the ZEAN and of ASREN with our local partner. We can arrange any kind of support that you need. For example, when I took over Signet 6 years ago and I didn't know anything about NRENs, the managing director of DAIC, the Danish NREN, came to Cyprus and we wrote together, we prepared our first business plan. So we can do the same for you if you need it.
So you can offer training for researchers?
Yes, we do. But you have to talk with you.
So maybe one comment I can make, what we did at WACREN, for instance, in Western Central Africa, we organized a retreat and we used this canvas. So it was an exercise where we also worked with somebody from the NREN in Cyprus. You know, during a retreat of 3 days, you know, we went through that process. Thank you.
Please see me after please see me after the session, and we are here to listen and to hear and to see how we can support. So for that, before concluding the session,
very short.
I just wanted to say that I have some publication here that contains the proposal I gave through my keynote speech. For those who are interested, I have copies here for free. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, thank you. Please join me to thank again the speakers. And over to the organizers.
Thank you again, and sorry for having a longer day. So I have some complaints about the last session that has 11 or whatever number of speakers. The reason for that, because we have been absent for the last 2 years. We did not, 3 years actually, since the last event, and we did not have the chance to meet and discuss. So we wanted to present as much as we can, updates, so that we can take it further and prepare. So that's why we will have, but I invite the speakers in the last session to stick to 5 to 7 minutes per speaker. Then we will maybe we will be able to finish on time. The second thing is that let's have a short coffee break, and maybe we can bring your coffee with you, so that we start as early as possible, let's say 10-15 minutes maximum. And don't forget that we have lunch now it's dinner. Maybe it's lunch for me. Dinner at 7 p.m. at the Jaida Hotel, Jaida Restaurant at the 3rd floor. So please be there. There you will see something, another experience from the Egyptian food and the Egyptian service. So please be there. Thank you, and let's be quick in the coffee break. Thank you.